This is an exciting one for us. We don't usually do lunch and learns on Mondays, but I hope everyone's week has started off really well. Today we have Irfani, who is here to talk to you directly from an accountant's perspective, someone who handles a lot of childcare audits. A lot of our members use his firm because he knows what he's doing and he understands all the Affordability Grant reporting and requirements and everything that goes along with it. I won't take up too much of your time because I had said to Wayne earlier, I have no place talking about this or giving advice on this today. I hand all of my stuff over to my accountant and don't touch it personally. But so yeah, with any of our lunch and learns, the whole goal today is to provide you as operators with some insights, some resources and advice that you can use in the real life practice of being a childcare operator. We wouldn't be offering this today if it wasn't for ChildFriendly and the support of the team and Wayne for being here every other week to make sure that we continue to bring these resources forward and you have an opportunity to ask people questions in the field. Today's lunch and learn, like I said, is all about setting you up for audit success, for reporting success. You can ask questions directly today that you may not have been able to have an outlet to ask. I know that Irfani, you have someone else from your team. I think Nick is here as well. So you have two people today that can cover pretty much anything you guys need to know in Alberta about financial reporting requirements. You can also use the chat during their presentation and we'll try our best to answer questions. We'll make sure that you have all the contact information for them as well afterwards if you want to follow up and get further advice down the road. And then Wayne will touch a little bit on how you can use some tools within ChildFriendly to make sure you're ready for those audits and those reporting requirements as they come up. But with that, I'm going to step out and I'm going to pass it all over to you. Thank you so much for being here today and for always showing up for us in ACE and in ChildFriendly, making sure that operators have actual access to someone who can really help them with this. So I will hand it all over to you right now and I'll handle the chat while you're presenting and we can go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal, and of course, thank you to you, Wayne, the entire team at ChildFriendly for having us here. I know when you first came and asked me to talk on this topic, I was actually very excited because it's what I found is audits is such a terminology for bigger entities, and if you work for a big organization, it's like, oh, I hate audit time, but they know what to go through. But when you're working with small business owners, childcare centers, and it's like the level that they need to step up from just doing a regular year end to actually needing an audit and the documentation. We found even just over the last couple of years working with a bunch of clients, it's a whole new element of learning. And so when you asked me to present, I was very excited because I'm like, it's a great opportunity for people to be able to actually understand what we're looking for on our side of things. So with that, I'm going to just share my screen here. I do have a bit of a presentation and I'll make sure there's lots of time left for questions because I know many people have lots of questions, which is always great. So, so with that here, let me just get this shared. Okay, so as Crystal had mentioned, I'm a managing partner of RMI LLP. We're a small accounting practice, a team of about 50 now in the office, just located in Northeast Calgary. But we work with clients across the country from everywhere from Victoria to PEI and up to Northwest Territories. So we can say we're coast to coast to coast, which is very exciting. We do full service, so we do everything from bookkeeping to year-end work, and of course, some assurance work, whether people need review engagements or audits as well. Now, with that being said, the main focus of today is going to be on audits specifically. So we're going to talk about mainly what we're looking for when we are performing some of these audits. So first one we'll talk about is kind of the revenue reconciliation, which is the biggest part of an audit that we're going through. We'll talk about some of the expense stuff that we look at, mainly the lease agreements and rent reconciliation. Payroll is another big expense, of course, so we'll talk a little bit about that and what we're looking for on that end, and then just general record keeping and best audit practices. And as I had mentioned, we've got lots of time for a Q&A as well. So revenue reconciliation. So when we're doing these audits, a lot of times people are asking me, well, why are they asking for these audits? Because we're submitting the information anyways, and the government already has the information. And what I want to do is start by just giving the framework of why the government's asking for the audit. When a daycare provider or childcare provider is submitting for the affordability grant, they're submitting the number of students that are actually in attendance for every single day, and the government is paying based on that. And so what they're looking for from us as the auditors is to verify that that data is correct, right, at the end of the day. So what we are doing a lot of times when we're looking for revenue reconciliation, we're constantly going to be asking for attendance sheets, because at the end of the day, what you're submitting to the government is based off of your attendance sheets and how many students are there. Are they meeting the criteria? Are they full-time? Are they part-time? And are they in the correct age group? And so what we are doing on a regular basis, and when we do audit, what we do is we do basically sample testing. So based on our back end calculations, we'll come in and say, okay, out of 12 months of the year you guys have submitted, we need to look at 4 of them. So we'll say, okay, we need to look at 4 months of your submissions that you've done. We need to look at 4 months of your income that's come in from the government, and does that align up? And then based on your submissions, we're going to look at the details to make sure that's lining up. And so a couple things when we're doing this. So of course, we're looking for the monthly fund reconciliation. So the affordability grant that you submitted, does it match what the government's paid you? Does it match deposits into bank accounts? And that's step 1. Step 2 then is the alignment of the fees. So are the fees in accordance with the agreement? Are there, in terms of the additional fees, what's being paid for by the government, what's being collected in? So we're looking to make sure that's aligned up. And then the big piece of it is the attendance, because of course, all of these submissions are based on the attendance records. So we are looking at the attendance hours, age classifications, and going through that. And then you see a note right here that says non-subsidized children need to be accounted for based on time and age classifications shown on the agreements. So we are looking at everything at the end of the day when it comes to the money, to the income that's being earned. And then this is the last one, is very important, because this is what will change. This is what could change your fees in an audit. When a lot of times people are coming to us saying, okay, what's the fee going to be? I say, okay, this is the fee based on everything being correct and everything being accurate, because discrepancies must be documented with clear explanations. And if there isn't clear explanations and there's actually errors that are found, what it means is we actually have to do more testing. So if the initial summary comes out that we got to test 4 out of 12 months of the period and we find a bunch of errors, we now have to go to 6 months. And so obviously that increases the time that's going to be involved on our end. And so that can impact your fees quite substantially. Okay. Now, when we're looking at this, what's really nice about the affordability grant is we don't have to audit all your expenses. And so what we really need to do, and this is where some of you might have heard of the term special audits, or I know some people have gone to firms and they audit the entire entity. We don't need to do that. With the affordability grant in particular, the government has asked us to verify the data relating to that grant. And so we verify the revenue, and we need to verify qualifying expenses. So that doesn't mean I got to go look at all your expenses. We just have to have enough qualifying expenses to actually meet how much incomes come in. So the good thing is many people have two things that relates to. One is your lease for the rent, and the second one is your wages. And so that's why I wanted to dig into that. If that doesn't cover the full amount of the affordability grant, we can look at things like office supplies and things like that as well that do qualify. Um, but what we need to do is we just do the testing on those expenses. But of course, these are the two big ones. So when we're talking specifically about how we're going to audit your lease agreements and your rent, again, we're going to do a reconciliation that's going to match your your actual lease. So we'll of course ask you for your lease. And this is very key. They need to be signed. A lot of times we've seen some that it's like, okay, here's my lease. It's an initial draft. It might not be signed by the other party, or things just don't get finalized. We're going to be looking for a signed lease because that's what's going to make it actually eligible, and that's what's going to account for the actual expense that we can verify. So make sure you got a signed copy of the lease. Oh, sorry. We're looking for your rent payment. So when we're looking at that, we're looking for we're going to go to your accounting software. Let's say it's QuickBooks, that your QuickBooks number should match your payments going out, and that should match your actual lease agreement. So that's what we're going to be looking for to verify in that case. And again, any discrepancies means we need an explanation, right? So sometimes maybe there's a portion of free rent, or maybe there's a subsidy that the landlord provided, or anything to that extent, which is okay. We just need that explanation. And then if there are errors again, we're going to do more testing, and that's when your fees will start to go up on the audit side. Okay. The last one, again, organized documentation demonstrates financial transparency. It is day and night when we're talking to somebody who has all their documents. I ask you for documents. You can give it to me very easily, very prepared. Everything tends to line up, and it's very clean, easy, and efficient, versus the person who is digging for documents. Let me go back to my emails and search for that signed lease that I should have got in my email, and all of that kind of stuff. There tends to be more errors because we're looking at the wrong documents, or we're looking at an old version, or whatever the case is. So again, when you're getting audited, it is very important that you have your stuff organized and you're on top of it at the end of the day. Okay. Now I told you there's two big expenses, our rent and our payroll. So the payroll's the other big one, right? And so when we're looking at your payroll documentation, which is going to be on a regular, it's every audit we're going to be looking at this. It's one of the biggest line items for every center. So what are we looking for again? We're not just looking to see that you paid an employee, but what we're looking for is how have you paid them? We're looking at the timesheets. So your timesheets must match hours reported at the end of the day. And we want to look and see, okay, where's those breaks and the actual categories. So sometimes you're paying sick time, vacation time, any of that. That should also be documented on those timesheets. And then that can get submitted to the payroll provider. That's the information that we're looking for at the end of the day. Okay. Now, those that are using a payroll provider, some of the more common ones, Ceridian, ADP, Payworks, great sources for their cost because they help keep things organized for sure on your payroll piece. And we can work with them closely to be able to get a lot of the data that we need, which is nice. But the key is they need your payroll needs to reconcile with the actual bank withdrawals. And so when you're using a third-party payroll provider, they're pulling the money, they provide the backup of how those totals came in. It makes your life easier. If you are doing your own payroll or using something like QuickBooks or something to that extent, as long as we can see that everything is matching, we're happy. If there's errors, no different. We're going to ask for more samples. We're going to ask for why there's a discrepancy, and it can get into more details. So a lot of times I do really recommend using one of the third-party payroll providers because it does help simplify this process. Not only when you're paying, because they will take the money, they'll pay your CRA remittance, they'll do all of that. But when it comes to the audit piece, they are very supportive because they have a lot of the back-end stuff available that we need on their systems and on their portals. Okay, so that's one thing that can really help out if you're not using them. And then the other piece that we're going to be looking for is any changes, right? So staff records must include level of employee, pay rates, changes that happen. Sometimes people are getting raises mid-year and things like that. We're going to be watching for that stuff. It does need to have the employee SIN because, of course, we need to verify they're an individual that's able to work in Canada. And then it has to align with the payroll service provider data, like I was mentioning on that end there. Okay. This last piece is really important again. Timesheets require authorized signatures and department documents must confirm an employee exit. So two pieces with this. When you do let go of, let's say you let go of a teacher or they leave, we want to see that process that's confirmed. So is there, so every organization will do it a little bit different, but have you done a formal offboarding of that employee is what we're looking for. And your timesheets, we can't just have timesheets. There has to be a verification process to know that this is accurate data. So if I'm a teacher and I'm filling in my timesheet, I can't just submit that straight to the payroll provider. I'm probably going to the operator of the center and they're verifying that this is what I worked. And a lot of times the operator of the center, the manager, is saying, yeah, this is good, and they submit it to for the payroll, but they're not actually doing any formal verification. So what does that formal verification, what are we looking for, is simple signatures, dates, things like that. The best practice, if it's manual, sign and date. If it's online, again, show some way of a digital signature, which will have the date attached to it. So we can turn around and say, yeah, this is the timesheet that the employee prepared. This is how we ended up getting it authorized. This matches the pay that was paid out, and the payroll records are all aligning. If we can see that, it makes our life a lot easier, and the easier our life is, the lower your fee will be, right? So a couple more things I just want to touch on in general before we jump into questions here. So record keeping and audit preparation. So at the end of the day, I've talked about a lot of the main pieces to the puzzle, right? The revenue recognition, the rent, and of course, on the last piece, the wages. But what is the other stuff we're going to be asking for? So essential documentation, which we're not making this up. This is part of your agreement for the affordability grant, which is really important. I know there's been times where we've gone and asked for this information and the client's coming back to us saying, well, why do I need this? This is a requirement in your actual affordability grant, and that's why we're asking for it. So you have to maintain child photos. And it's very different if you have them all organized online versus, hey, I've got my pictures on my phone, let me go find them and send them to you. Because again, one's going to be a lot more efficient, right? When did the child enroll? Signed enrollment forms. Again, just a regular enrollment form doesn't qualify as being complete from an audit perspective. So it's really, really important that you're getting things signed, doing the verifications that are supposed to be required. Of course, parent contact information, the payment summary reports, claim summary reports. We're not necessarily looking 100% at all of this stuff, but this is a requirement part of your affordability grant. So there will be times where we will come in and ask for some of this information because it is part of the grant in order for you to qualify for it. Okay. And this is a famous line in audit. If it's not documented, it's not done. And so keep that in mind. It's something that they preach to all auditors. If it's not documented, it's not done. So it's very important that you're actually doing that. And again, part of the agreement, this needs to be kept on file for a minimum of 6 years after the affordability grant agreement grant dates. Okay. This is just some tips along the way. Having a separate bank account for grant funds and reconciling all accounting records. This is easier, but not a requirement. If you have really good record keeping, I have a lot of clients that their grant funds are going into their regular accounts, but their bookkeeping is tracked very separately and very clean. So it's very easy for us to see. But if you're using a third-party bookkeeper, not somebody internal, and you want to make life easier along the way, just put a separate bank account for the grant funds because it'll make sure it's very easy to match everything along the way. I talked about the attendance records. This is probably the most important piece that we've seen a ton of issues with. Your attendance records need to be very clean and they need to match your payment summaries. We found in past audits that we've done, I found where um, the child had a birthday, they weren't moved to the proper category, it impacted the funding, there's money that was owed back after the audit. So things like that, it is very important. Or a child left the center, but they were not taken off of the attendance sheet, and so they were getting submitted every single month for a claim. And again, that creates an amount that's going to be paid back for the audit because you've been overfunded. So those kinds of things are very important, that you're actually keeping this very accurate and reviewing it on a regular basis. So the other piece, just in general, when we're preparing what we call a compilation and a tax return for a company, we're not coming and asking you very specific questions, but generally, you're giving us the information, we're using that information and we're running with it. But when it comes to audit, you're going to find there's going to be a ton more interaction between our team and yourself. And so it's really important that you prepare for auditors' walkthroughs. What these are is we're going to come to you and ask you, how do you run your business? What are the steps involved? How do you enroll a child? What is being signed off on? Who's in charge of signing off? And this is the stuff that we're going to ask you, and then we're going to ask to see the actual paperwork behind it. So be prepared. You're going to have to invest time. This is when you're getting audited, it's a two-way street. We can do a big chunk of it, but we're going to need your support in the process because we need a lot more of those details. A lot of people say, okay, well, if I've done it once, do I need to do it again the following year? Yes, but to a lesser degree, because we do, of course, have the documentation from the first one. So if nothing's changed in your systems, no turnover of staff, things like that, we have a lot of the data, but we're still going to do that walkthrough to verify that nothing's being changed year over year. Okay, but it for sure does make it easier a second time around. Other stuff to keep in mind, make sure you're keeping your backup of your insurance documents. And then the last piece I'm going to touch on here is accrual versus cash accounting. When a lot of people do their bookkeeping, they use what's called cash accounting. So cash accounting is money in, and then I record it as revenue. But when we're starting to do audit, we have to follow accounting standards. Accounting standards say we have to do accrual accounting. And the biggest difference is you're recording things when they're earned, not paid. For instance, if you're doing cash accounting and you pay your rent on the 30th for the next month, it would get recorded on the 30th and be recorded in the previous month. When we're doing accrual accounting, we need to make sure we put it in the proper period, so it'd get paid in the first. So it is a little bit different. If you aren't doing accrual accounting, I would recommend talking to your accountant as soon as possible to set up your books so you are doing accrual accounting. It is very important when you're getting audits done that we're looking at this, because even grant funding money, for example, it gets recorded in the period it's earned, not when you get paid. So when your fiscal year end is the month that it's ending, you're going to get funding for that period in the following month, but it gets recorded in that fiscal period. So it's really important that you're doing this properly. Otherwise, again, it's going to create more issues and more work, which means more fees. Okay. And then documentation that's not available, you want to make sure that you have it available for the time the audit starts. So you want to be doing a review of all these documents in advance and make sure you have them properly done with the proper sign-offs and things like that on that end. Okay. I only have a couple more slides to go through and then we'll jump into questions. But the next piece, of course, is just action items to help increase the efficiency of the audit. Not only does it make our life easier, but it saves you guys money. So big things: ensure all information and accounting records reconcile. This one's probably the most important. We've seen it where people will give us their books, their bank's not reconciled, or there's things that aren't lining up. Again, we know right off the bat it's going to be a time-consuming audit because the information's not there and all accurate. Ensure all information needed for the audit is readily available. Typically, when we start these audits, we will send a list of all the documentation we need. That first list allows us to select samples. When we actually select the samples, then we go into the next stage of asking you for the backup details. So it's not a one and done, which a lot of times when we're doing just a simple tax return, we can ask you for all the documents up front and then leave you alone. This one, there is a couple steps involved that we can't get all the information right off the bat. So it's really important that when we ask you for information, have it all available. You can provide it to us, and then when we get more details, pick our samples, you can provide that documentation, and it helps ensure a very smooth process along the way. Okay. Again, if you're not doing your part in this, the biggest thing you're going to see is increased audit fees, because all that happens is there's more time. And of course, an accounting firm, we're billing out time. If it takes more time, you're going to be paying more fees. So the more organized you are, the cheaper your audit will be, which will be nice. They could cause a delay, which is really important too, because the timelines for the filing of these audits is very tight. So if you don't have everything ready, there's a good chance we're not meeting the government deadlines. They've been pretty generous giving extensions, but we're starting to find they are getting more and more strict on these. So it's really important that you are supporting us, otherwise we can't do our part. And then the last one, if you're not reviewing this information, there's potential clawback of some of the funds, like I mentioned. So if you have if you have incorrectly done some of the submissions, you've been paid extra money, and then that means you're going to end up owing it back. And it can add up very substantially, because remember, we're looking at data that's already in the past, a lot of times over a year old. And so if we're the ones catching an error, that means that you're going to be paying back 1 to 2 years of funding for a child that might not be required. And now you guys can imagine how much that can be. So you don't want us to be paying a big audit fee to us and then all of a sudden have to pay back a bunch of the funding requirements for a bunch of the grant funding. Because what they do is they'll just take it out from from your next submission. So it's a big cash flow hit for sure. And then an additional tip, read the agreement. Right? I know a lot of people say, hey, I got the money, I've signed it, but then they actually don't go through what's required. And if you spend a little bit of time actually reading the agreement, it will really help you set up your business for success, because you'll actually know what is required on your end. So last couple pieces here. I had shared this in a previous presentation, but wanted to kind of give an update, because I know a lot of people still today are saying, hey, I went to see my accountant, they're charging me $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 for this audit for this affordability grant. And that's where we do these, what we call special audits or special reviews. They don't need to be that big or that expensive, because we're only looking at specific information relating to the grants. Now, on some not-for-profits, or if you're providing, let's say, ECS care and you fall under the school board system, you may require a full audit. So we do those as well, but of course the costs for those do end up getting a lot higher. Many people require review engagements because of bank funding. So this is a good reference point in terms of what costs would be when you're working with our firm. And then lastly, as I mentioned previously, just a quick touch up on some of our services here. Of course, we do full-scale accounting, bookkeeping, tax services across Canada and the US. Assurance services is what we call audits and reviews. And then we do a lot of corporate structuring and consulting work as well. But with that, I'll open it up for some Q&A. And then, yeah, we can go forward from there.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you for covering all of that. I know every time you do a presentation, there's always so much more that I learned that I didn't take in the first time. So, okay, so we have someone from Early Learners. Do you want to go first? Your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you for that information. It's very informative. We are a day home agency, so where we're contracting educators to open day homes in their residents. So they're all contracted. There is no payroll really. They don't get a pay stub. It's all invoices and payments. So is there anything different that we need to be keeping track of or recording?
Yeah, so on your end, like no different than from a business standpoint for you,
Mhm.
because you're day home. Are you getting the affordability grant,
Correct.
or is
Yeah.
that so that's coming to you?
So same
So
thing. We keep track of the educators submit the childcare hours for the children. Then
yeah,
we, have the report at the end of the month, submit it, collect the affordability grant, and then disperse it throughout
okay.
the next month as we get it.
Perfect. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So in your case, in terms of what you need to record, that's going to be different. You don't have the wages, but you have the
No.
payments going out to each of the centers.
Yeah.
And so what we
Yeah.
would be doing is looking at your reconciliations for how much you're paying to each of the centers. So for
Okay.
example, you're getting the affordability grant, you're getting X amount for this center. We're going to come to the extent of saying, okay, how much did you pay to the center? How did you calculate
Yeah.
that? And then we're
Yeah.
verifying that data. So in your case, it wouldn't be too different, but that's going to be the biggest piece. And then the most important is, again, the authorization and verification of this information. So we'll be looking for signatures or some way of who's authorized the amount that's going out, who's confirmed the amount that's being requested, and all of that information.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then one more piece to touch on is there will be, again, we're going to be asking to the specific day homes that you're contracting to. We're going to want to see the attendance records and all of that same information, right? So it's really important you're either collecting that or make sure that you're doing an audit of it, because we're going to be asking for that same information.
How are you? I'm just
Okay.
listening to
Sounds good.
about the affordability grant.
The what?
Affordability grant.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I know it's probably
Sorry,
a
I have
lot of
another-
information.
I have another question. So once, because the wages that we pay out to the educators, that covers the whole affordability grant and more. So then do I need to be showing more expenses, or is it once those expenses cover the affordability grant, the audit is done?
Once we have enough expenses that cover the affordability grant, we can stop there.
Okay.
So a lot of times that would be sufficient enough.
Yeah.
And that's why I found probably in 90% of the cases between wages and rent, it's being covered off. So in your case, even the money that's going back to them, that would be sufficient enough. And then we would just spend the time auditing that one expense
Yeah,
category.
because we don't keep $1 of the affordability grant. That just goes straight to the educators because we collect
Perfect.
agency fees from the educators that we retain as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense on that end. So
Yeah.
that, because that covers that portion, that would be sufficient enough. But keep in mind, again, we're going to be looking at the details in terms of, is that amount correct, right? In
Yeah.
terms of the affordability grant that's coming in.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I was just mentioning, like, it's probably a lot to take in a short presentation here. I know I tried to go through and provide as much detail, but even if you're listening to this again or a couple times after, the keys are just really hone in on where I'm talking about the revenue recognition and reconciliations, and then the expense categories, because every center will be doing it a little bit different, which is okay. But the information we're going to request is going to be very consistent and the same across the board. And so that's the stuff that I really want you guys to have ready and available. Because if you can provide that to us right when we're asking for it, the whole process becomes a lot smoother. We can hit deadlines. There's no cutoffs of funding or any issues along the way then, right?
Any other questions before we wrap up, I guess, or move on?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about child-friendly and the staff hours. So maybe Wayne can jump in here. So
Sure.
right now we're doing paper tracking for staff hours. So I think that matches with what your finale said about having staff like sign and then a director also authorize those hours so that there's a good line for authorization. But if we move to using child-friendly, is there like a signature or an approval process so that those hours are recorded in a way that the auditors find acceptable?
Did you
Sure,
catch
ma'am.
all of that, Wayne?
Yeah. Basically, our platform will essentially track the login of the staff that signs in and do all the attendance tracking. That seems just to be kind of standard, though. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have maybe dealt with folks that use other platforms as well, such as Lilio, etc., that also track all their attendance digitally. What kind of, yeah, it'd be great if you can.
The biggest one is what you kind of mentioned there, Wayne. So it's because it's going to be based on the IDs of the approvals. So when different staff are logging in, that creates the audit trail essentially at the end of the day, because then we know who's done that action. And that's why it's like really important, even in this system, that you're not sharing user IDs or things like that, because you don't want somebody who's unauthorized to go in and approve the payroll. But Jelena, to your question, because there's different logins that's tracking in the back end, the system will track the data of who's done the inputs. That's the information that we can rely on at the end of the day to make sure that the correct authorizations are in place.
Thank you.
Anyone else? You can just jump right in and ask your question if you have one before we go. I did share contact information in the chat so that you have it available to you. We will also share the recording and a few different resources we're putting together around this to help you. In the next few days, you'll have that if you registered for this, and we'll make sure that contact information is in there too, so you can reach out to your Fanny after this and stay in touch. Is there anything, Wayne, that you want to add? Do you want me to share my screen with a few of the features of ChildFriendly just before we wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Our platform is definitely very suited to deal with a lot of these compliance and audit issues. We've definitely built in a lot of features on our platform, digitally signed forms. We do look at the Affordability Grant requirements. We built in a claim summary report to deal with that. We have a payment summary as well with our integrated financing. We sync to QuickBooks Online as well. So when you are capturing your revenues and your payments, everything's captured at the appropriate timing. It's very easy to deal with the invoicing and payment recording on our platform as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of audit useful features on our platform. So yeah, it'd be great if anyone would be interested and check us out at some time. And also to note, we do have our learning module webinar that's coming out in, I believe, 3 weeks? Pretty soon here. So we will have an announcement on that. Yeah, it'd be great if everyone can keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
I just want to jump in and say one thing too. Like
Sure.
when using something like child-friendly, all those questions that I asked, it's kind of like the payroll piece when I said when you're using a third-party payroll provider, all that data is held inside the storage. So it's very easy for us even then to go in and extract that data if we need to. And it's no different than using something like child-friendly because it makes sure that everything is lined up. The attendance is then matching with your grant submissions. So it makes the whole process a lot smoother along the way. So just wanted to at least mention that because it can save you costs on the back end when doing the audit when you have things that are more streamlined for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for doing this and especially for doing it on a Monday. I hope this has been helpful for everyone. I know the feedback just on our chat already has been very, very excited to have you here and a lot of gratitude for your knowledge and sharing it with everyone this afternoon. Like I said, this is recorded. If you need to get in touch and you don't have the contact information, you can always reach out to Wayne or I, and we'll make sure that we connect you guys. But yeah, thank you again for your time today. And thanks everyone for sharing your lunch with us. And we will, I guess, see you in a couple of weeks. And look in your inboxes for the next kind of update on the webinar for the learning modules, because that is going to be a big, exciting thing coming to ChildFriendly.
I think we have one more question there
Oh.
from,
Sorry, Tanya, I didn't see your hand. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
you just unmute there, Tanya.
Did she drop off? I think she might have. See her here. I don't see her on here. I can reach out to Tanya and just connect her with you so she can follow up with a question. But yeah.
Sure.
So I guess,
No.
yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for everything.
Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
great
No
afternoon.
problem. Thank you
Thanks.
for having us again, and thank you
Anytime,
for everyone for your
anytime.
time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.